All right, what's going on, people? We are back with episode number 27, Conscious Approach Podcast. JV Wins here, as you can see, kind of flying solo for this video. I wanted to talk about a story that took place last week involving a sports commentator by the name of Domonique Foxworth. He works for ESPN. He's a commentator, mainly comments on the NFL throughout ESPN's various platforms on a regular basis. He's a pretty prominent figurehead on ESPN in terms of on-air talent. And he made some comments last week that kind of stirred the pot for a lot of people. Now, if you haven't heard the clip or you don't know what Domonique Foxworth said, I'll have a link for the comments, a little 30-second snippet in the description box of this video. But he was on a podcast with Bomani Jones, who's also another commentator on air talent for ESPN. He was on Bomani Jones's Truth Tellers podcast. And, they were on the subject of the NFL and they were talking about Josh Allen. Somehow, someway they got onto the subject of Josh Allen's fan base. And Domonique Foxworth made comments basically saying that, when something bad happens to Josh Allen, he doesn't necessarily root for Josh Allen to fail per se, but when something bad happens that detrimentally affects Josh Allen, there is a part of him that is pleased because it means that fans of Josh Allen are suffering. And so, I guess he has an issue with Josh Allen's fans, and he goes on to make a comment saying that, Josh Allen's fans are just a bunch of flag-waving, dog-loving people with skull and crossbones, in their, Twitter avatars and profiles. And, if you search through the Twitter feeds of Josh Allen's fans, they've made objectionable comments in the past. And so Josh Allen's fans are pretty suspect in that regard. Basically, he was, generalizing a broad base of people who are supporters of Josh Allen by leaning on certain tropes that insinuate other aspects of a person's character. I'll leave it at that. I'll let you draw your own conclusions as to what he may mean by somebody who loves to wave the American flag and likes dogs and, and looks, and favors skull and crossbones and uses that type of imagery in their avatars for social media. Now, I don't spend nearly enough time on social media researching fans of Josh Allen and the types of things that they're into. There's way too many other things I need to be doing my time. But he did paint a large segment of people with a broad brush. And the reason why I wanted to spend some time on a video talking about this is because I think that the fact that he made those comments represents, in a microcosm, where we are and where most Western societies are today in terms of the climate of social discourse. And that, particularly in this country, I think that it warrants analyzing because there are certain aspects of it that I found to be very troubling. Now, I'll say that I found Dominique's comments to be objectionable. It makes me uncomfortable when people are painted with a broad brush in such a way that the comments can be deemed defensive by a lot of people. Now, I am not somebody who is anti-Dominique or anti the comments that he made necessarily. I just think that you're kind of treading shallow water when you make comments that look to paint a large segment of people in a broad brush, no matter what side of the fence that you're on. But I found the comments that he made to be objectionable. And I also found the reaction to his comments to be equally objectionable. But I want to address what he said first, because that's the deeper issue here. So, with respect to social justice issues, because that's really what this boils back down to at the end of the day, Domonique Foxworth is one of the many people on ESPN who has definitely allowed him, he has definitely firmly supplanted himself on one side of the aisle when it comes to social justice issues on mainstream media outlets. And that's fine if he does that. That's his prerogative. Him individually is not the issue. It's the climate of the commentary that's the issue. And I don't blame him personally for that. I blame his employer. Uh, I've made this comment before in the past, and I still believe it to this day. I think I talked about it when me and my man Dave De Niro did the video discussing Dwayne Wade and the reaction to him supporting his son wanting to undergo a gender transition. And I made the statement that, I find it unfortunate that we have gone so far to one side of the social justice, discussion and climate in this country that it has now been deemed righteous to be on one side of that conversation. And if you're not on that side of that conversation, fully entrenched on that side of the conversation, but you're more so somewhere in the middle, you might as well be someone who's on the side of the bad guys, people who are, more to the right center of that conversation. Liberal ideology has been co-opted with social justice concepts and contextualized in such a way that if you're on that side, you're one of the good guys. And if you're not on that side, you're one of the bad guys. And that is unfortunate because a lot of these issues do boil down to a matter of nuance. And when you're talking about issues that are a matter of nuance, the nuance bears discussion, and there isn't always a cut and dry, right or wrong, black or white. And, this climate has been magnified by what I believe to be the mainstream media's implicit allowance of a climate to fester in which now it is socially and professionally appropriate for these media entities to align with one side over the other instead of remaining impartial. I said during that video talking about Dwayne Wade that it has become apparent to me that ESPN, as well as the majority of other mainstream media outlets in this country, they have allowed what I call hyper-liberal commentary to, run the gamut on their media outlets in such a way that it would appear to me as though ESPN parrots this sort of commentary. Now, I don't have a problem necessarily with ESPN allowing hyperliberal commentary to be afforded a platform on its media outlets. I have a problem with the fact that ESPN hasn't afforded that same luxury to counterpoints to that commentary. And I'll give you an example. I won't name, there was a lot of on-air talent that perpetuates the singularity of ESPN's hyperliberal climate. You have individuals like the aforementioned Domonique Foxworth. You got Bomani Jones, people who used to work there like Jamel Hill and Michael Smith. A host of other people. You have people like Mina Kimes. You got Sarah Spain. All these people who work for ESPN. Now, I don't necessarily have an issue with any of these people expressing their views on ESPN. We now live in a day and age in which it has become a mainstay for mainstream media outlets to support the views of people who lean, not necessarily along purely impartial lines, and that's perfectly fine. But if you're going to allow a platform for one side, it's only right that you allow a platform for the other side. And I think it's unfortunate that when you have people like Will Cain, who, I never necessarily agree with everything Will Cain had to say, but it was very apparent that Will Cain was somebody who leaned more center-right. A lot of his views were on the conservative side. They were more on the traditional side. And he was someone who wasn't afraid to express those opinions, despite the fact that he was in a professional climate surrounded by individuals who thought the complete opposite of what he thought. And, I could only glean from watching ESPN on a daily basis that not only were his colleagues on opposing ideological sides to him, but upper management at ESPN must also be on opposing ideological sides than him, because there's no one else other than him who is providing a counterpoint to the more liberal-minded social justice commentary that is basically running the gamut on ESPN. There needs to be more of a balance with these mainstream media outlets, but that's not necessarily what we're seeing. And so when you have somebody like Will Cain, who surreptitiously is no longer at ESPN because he sought alternative professional opportunities, and I think he's somewhere on Fox now. If you think for one second that Will Cain didn't depart ESPN, at least in small part because he found himself in a toxic professional environment due to the fact that he was surrounded by people who were constantly chastising him for his more traditional leaning views, then you probably just don't watch enough of this mainstream media stuff, because that undoubtedly had something to do with why he isn't at ESPN anymore. And honestly, that's not right. That's not fair. And I'm saying that as someone who, by and large, tends to agree with the majority of viewpoints that one would probably deem to be social justice oriented, more liberal minded, more left leaning. It bothers me that there isn't an audience, a platform. There should be an opportunity for counterpoints with respect to social justice to be made without those people being demonized for their opinions. And that's not the climate that we're living in today. Things are extremely one-sided. And the one-sided nature of this is due, in my opinion, solely because these media outlets at the very top, in terms of the brass, the people who run these organizations, agree with these ideologies, and they allow more people who are ideologically aligned with these viewpoints to comprise the on-air talent, and they don't afford the same opportunities to enough people who are more right-leaning or traditional-minded. And it's created an imbalance in this country with respect to the climate of social discourse, and it's filtered its way all the way down into social media and the general population. You can go on Twitter all day long and express something that is in favor of defunding the police, or more radicalized ideas such as, think about anything, any sort of more radical left-leaning idea. But if you were to come onto those same outlets and talk about how you adhere to traditional family values, you would get chastised for that. At the top levels of mainstream media, this type of environment is what is the norm nowadays. And it's really unfortunate. I take myself, for example, and I'll use a topic that is, something that is pretty top of mind for everybody nowadays in terms of social justice reform and the climate of and the climate of social discourse in this country nowadays. It is perfectly reasonable for me to be someone who says, hey, I support LGBTQ initiatives. I don't necessarily have an issue with LGBTQ issues being brought to the forefront so that these people can be afforded the same civil liberties and freedoms as everybody else and the same opportunities. I'm all for that. But at the same time, if I say that I have more conservative ideology when it comes to family values, and come the day when I am given the opportunity to raise my own family and rear my own children, I'm going to rear my son in such a way that he is socialized to be a man and to be masculine. And I'm going to rear my daughter in such a way that she is socialized to be a woman and to be feminine. Not necessarily that one gender is more or less superior than the other, but that I adhere to standards of traditional gender roles because I think that they play a role in the proper raising of children in society. And so I'm going to adhere to that. I was raised on those ideals and I see nothing wrong with them. I'm going to raise my own children on those ideals. So it's nothing against LGBTQ people, but I am not going to rear my own children in such a way that they are going to fall along the spectrum. Now, if it just so happens to work out in such a way that I happen to raise a son or a daughter who ends up being on the spectrum, I'm going to love them all the same. But if I am going to leave it up to the whimsical nature of the world to let them choose where they end up without having an influence as their father in terms of how they're raised and socialized, that's absolutely not going to happen. Now, I can take that stance, and that's a perfectly reasonable stance, while at the same time being someone who says, hey man, it's no sweat off my back if LGBTQ people want more of an equal prominent role in our society. But as someone who believes in that, if I am to go onto any sort of mainstream media outlet and make those statements, I would probably be chastised for those comments. And that is a perfectly reasonable ideology to maintain with respect to family values, because family values aren't black and white. There's a lot of gray in there. There's a lot of nuance. And we are no longer giving people the right, the God-given right, to adhere to the nuance and the gray when it comes to certain issues that aren't so cut and dry, that aren't so black and white. Best believe if I make those comments on any mainstream media outlet, I'm going to be criticized for them. And I will take on that criticism, because I don't give a damn whether people like the fact that I adhere to traditional gender roles when it comes to family values. That is my prerogative as a private citizen, and I am going to raise my children however I see fit. If you don't like it, then you stick to raising your children however you see fit, and we'll meet along the way. No issue there. I have no problem with what you're doing, so you shouldn't have a problem with what I'm doing. But this hyper-liberal climate in this country has festered in such a way that if you express more traditional points of view, albeit as reasonable as they may be, you might get raked through the coals for that. Because the idea nowadays is you're supposed to be so far on the side of no morals, no rules, no constraints, no adherence to traditional family values whatsoever. Everything goes. Most people out here nowadays seemingly want to shoot out at the OK Corral. And anybody who wants some law and order is deemed a problem and a bad guy and needs to be castrated and cast out into society. And, quite frankly, that's not the world that we need to be living in. Everybody should have a platform to, so long as it's reasonable, say what they need to say, because a lot of these matters are nuanced and they come down to issues of gray. They don't come down to issues of black and white. And I think Domonique Foxworth's comments are synonymous with the current climate that we're in, because he felt so emboldened to make those comments because of the fact that his employer, ESPN, has, whether implicitly or explicitly, I'm not involved in ESPN in any kind of way. I wouldn't speculate that far. I don't know, upper management is, coming to these people and saying, hey, man, have at it, say whatever you want to say. But there's definitely an environment that has been implicitly allowed to fester within not only ESPN, but other mainstream media outlets that that sort of props up hyper-liberal commentary and sort of props down non-hyper-liberal commentary. And it's created this environment of opposers. There's divisiveness, because an environment of we are on the side of righteousness, therefore we're right, and we believe what we believe, and we can say whatever we want. And any other viewpoint is not on the side of righteousness, therefore it is not allowed anywhere on our airwaves, and we need to get it out of here. And, it's completely unfair. And let me say again, I am not one of these content creators who, because I feel this way, I have sort of developed a disposition about myself that is anti-social justice. They call it woke these days, anti-woke. By no means am I anti-woke. I just call things how I see it. And what I see is, with respect to the mainstream media in America today, there has been a platform afforded to what I would characterize as hyperliberalism. And there has been a platform that has been stricken from the record when it comes to anyone who is to the right or center of those views. Not radical people. I'm not necessarily saying that people who are, of a hyper-liberal mindset or of a social justice mindset, if those people have an opportunity to exist, then there's also an opportunity for people who believe all black people should be incarcerated, or who believe that all black people don't deserve opportunity, or who believe women or people who are LGBTQ don't deserve opportunity. That is a radical type of mindset that, of course, if we encounter it at any turn, it needs to be called out and criticized. But reasonable critiques with respect to gray issues such as family values and economics, politics even, those deserve a right to have just as prominent a role in shaping the social discourse in this country as people who lean solely on the side of social justice. And right now, things are purely one-sided. I'm not on this. I'm not anti-woke. I'm not anti-social justice. You got a lot of these commentators and and content creators on YouTube who have positioned themselves as the anti-woke police. So any chance that they have to call out, over political correctness or wokeness with regards to any mainstream media outlets, particularly ESPN, because a lot of these content creators on YouTube, they have, garnered a substantial audience base simply making YouTube videos in which they criticize ESPN for the comments of its on-air talent. And honestly, even though I'm not someone who is always on the side of the anti-woke crowd, because I am more fair-minded and I try to call things how I see it, I understand the criticism there, because as I've said, ESPN, in my opinion, just based on my observation watching the network for a long time now up to this point, has been complicit in allowing an environment of hyperliberalism to fester with regards to its on-air talent. I mean, at this point, I think that it's fair to make that assertion, and I don't think I'm necessarily being unreasonable for saying so. And I'm going to say it again. It's not that, these liberal critiques have a place on ESPN so prominently. It's the fact that there is an antithesis of that is allowed to be given, that isn't afforded the same platform. And I think that everyone has room to live so long as it is within reason. And, Domonique Foxworth, the comments that he made, honestly, I found his comments to be funny. It's interesting because if you play the 30-second snippet just of what he said, Bomani Jones's reaction to what he said is one of laughter. And the first time I heard it, I laughed because, I found it to be funny. The words in and of themselves, I found to be funny. But I also knew that it was only a matter of time before he would face some backlash for it. It's just, I knew it was coming, because just as there has been a groundswell of people who lean heavily on the side of social justice commentary and critiques at all times with respect to their platforms, there is now a huge groundswell of people who just take whatever opportunity they can to look for the wokeness and sort of bring it back down to earth because there's no place for it. And I think that it does a disservice to reasonable social justice commentary, because there is definitely a place for social justice commentary so long as it's reasonable. But, because the mainstream media has been complicit in allowing social justice rhetoric to run rampant on its airwaves, we now have this environment in which the reaction to social justice commentary, whether reasonable or unreasonable, is all the same, and it's all an overreaction. And on the other side, we have an environment in which social justice commentary is the only type of commentary that is allowed to maintain a prominent place with respect to mainstream media outlets. It's unfortunate, and I hope that we see a reverse course of this at some point in the near future. I thought it was unfortunate that Will Cain left ESPN, because it was a signal to me that, conservative commentary on ESPN and other mainstream media outlets has truly died. There was an internal Cold War going on, a holy war, if you will, of people who were trying to, say, hey, social justice critiques aren't necessarily a bad thing, but let's not cast all forms of traditional by the wayside, because we need some form of, traditional, ideals and values to remain necessary in terms of the general thought processes of the collective masses. And we don't have that anymore. What we have is, the social justice side, which says, if you don't think the way we need you to think lock and step, then there's a problem with you. And we're going to deal with you because you need to be thinking exactly what we need to think. I said this during the Nick Cannon video that my boy Dave DeNiro and I did, when Nick Cannon was, removed from his position at CBS Viacom for the anti-Semitic comments that he made. Which, by the way, his comments were a lot more objectionable than what Domonique Foxworth said. But social justice in 2020, and now as we move into 2021, is no longer about speaking truth to power in terms of, let's talk about what's right and what's wrong, and let's try to get rid of what's wrong as much as possible and bring to the forefront what's right. It's now about, if you don't think exactly what we think in terms of, everything is fair game, everything has a right to be, and if you criticize anything that's not complete and utter tolerance for everything under the sun, then we're going to cast you out and deal with you appropriately. And we're going to chastise you for your beliefs because we have no room for that. We only have room for complete and utter tolerance for anything under the sun because that's what's right. And that's not right. That's not necessarily what's right. That's actually what's necessarily wrong. What's necessarily right is an acknowledgement that everyone has the right to adhere to their own ideology with respect to matters of gray, like family values, like politics, like economics, because a lot of these issues are nuanced and they do depend greatly upon one's socioeconomic upbringing and their upbringing and their own, individual child rearing. Now, that's not necessarily to say that one's child rearing can't involve certain, moralities and ideologies that do need to be addressed because they can be harmful and toxic. I am just talking about what is reasonable. So I take myself as an example, as I said minutes before. If I am someone who believes in traditional family values, man, woman, son, daughter, male, female, that is my prerogative, and there is nothing unreasonable about that. That is a reasonable, more traditional form of thinking with respect to family values. And there's a place for that in mainstream media outlets. But unfortunately, as I said before, we sort of live in this climate where if you express more center-right, forms of thinking, you might be criticized for that. And, people need to stop being so defensive and just understand that not everyone hails from the same background necessarily as you. Not everyone thinks the way that you need to think, and there's room for everybody to live. And, people took ESPN to the woodshed for Domonique Foxworth's comments, and I understood why, because that's, what happens. Someone who is on the airwaves for a media outlet says something that's objectionable. People are going to jump all over social media and they're going to hold the corporate conglomerate to task for those comments, as if to suggest that ESPN is somehow in compliance with comments that Domonique Foxworth made. And you know what? To be honest with you, they might be. Who knows? But unless you're in those boardroom meetings or in those, creative, meetings in the offices of ESPN, no one knows for sure. All you can do is speculate and draw your own conclusions. I think it's entirely possible that they are, but I also think that it is well within ESPN's right to say no comment. And that's what they did. They have no comment for what Domonique said because they don't have to co-sign what he said, and they don't have to cop to co-signing what he said because he is an on-air talent. But what they do need to reconcile with is the fact that every time a commentator on their airwaves makes a comment that can be perceived as offensive in any kind of way towards a large group of people, those groups of people are going to take them to task for that commentator's comments, and they're going to call into question ESPN as to whether they are complicit with the comments that someone such as Foxworth made. And they need to be prepared. They need to reconcile with the fact that that's going to happen every single time. And the only way that they can stop that from happening is if more people like Will Kane, who isn't there anymore, are afforded the same platform to expound upon their beliefs the same way that the hyperliberal commentators on ESPN are afforded a platform to expound their commentary. And right now, things are very one-sided. More traditional right-leaning points of view aren't afforded a platform to express themselves because it has been deemed, I guess, not in the best, professional, I don't know, however you want to put it. It's not necessarily in the best interest of, professional evolution, if you will, I guess, or progressiveness to allow more traditional right commentary to, foster on ESPN airwaves, and to a greater extent, mainstream or lamestream, as I call it, media airwaves. And it's unfortunate, man. It really is. And, again, I'm a fan of Domonique Foxworth as an NFL commentator. Some things that he says I don't agree with. Other things that he says I do agree with. But you have to understand that if you're going to get into the socio-political game, which ESPN has completely done, ESPN has made it clear, in my eyes, that they are going to invest in on-air talent that is going to prop them up and push them to the forefront in terms of being front and center of the socio-political commentary game. And if you're going to do that, you need to be a little more impartial, not in terms of your ideology, but in terms of the ideologies of your on-air talent. Things need to be more balanced in terms of who is afforded a platform to expound their viewpoints. For every 5 Domonique Foxworths, there's like maybe one antithesis viewpoint of that on the air. And that's what needs to change. That's a problem. It's a serious problem. Things right now are very imbalanced. And, I think that is a microcosm of the social climate, of the climate of social discourse in this country nowadays. You're allowed to say what you want so long as what you're saying is in compliance with the social justice contingent, 100% lock and step. And not everything is so black and white, good or evil. But because the social justice contingent believes themselves to be on the side of righteousness, they are afforded the opportunity to say whatever they want without, getting chastised for what it is that they have to say. And people who are on the opposing side of that aren't afforded that luxury because they aren't on the side of righteousness. Therefore, everything that they say is wrong, unjust, needs to be criticized, and need to be raked through the coals. And it's a problem. We need to do something about that. I think as a people, if I'm going to sort of break this down, in terms of the collective masses, and just sort of add my own personal critique to how we can take something from what Domonique Foxworth had to say and extrapolate that to our own behaviors and habits on a daily basis. I think we need to try and understand, or at least we need to do a better job as a people of being more reasonable and understanding that, there is a such thing as reasonable. There's a such thing as reasonable, viewpoints and ideologies with respect to issues that involve considerable matters of gray. Things like family values, things like, matters of pro-choice versus pro-life. These are all matters of gray, people. And I'm not expressing any of my viewpoints on one side or the other with respect to these various issues. But the point that I'm trying to make is it's not always cut and dry. There are always instances of circumstantial evidences and anecdotes that need to be taken into account when we're talking about these various issues. So if someone makes a statement that you find objectionable because you're on the side of pro-life or you're on the side of pro-choice, stop and analyze how objectionable were the comments really. Are you triggered to criticize that person for their views because you simply don't agree with them? Or are you triggered to criticize that person for their views because they actually did make views that are truly objectionable? There's a fine line there, and you really do need to dissect that, sort of in an instant before you're ready to get to your itchy Twitter fingers and hit send. Analyze it for an instance. Am I being unreasonable here? Do I find these comments to be objectionable simply because I am on an opposing side? Or do I find these comments to be objectionable because the comments in and of themselves are truly objectionable? We've lost sight of where that line is. And we're sitting here saying everything that isn't on my side is objectionable. And to hell with you if you don't agree with everything that I believe. We need to find that line of demarcation back because it's the only way that we're going to be able to advance and progress as a people. I think that the eradication of that line of demarcation has been perpetuated by the advent of the lamestream media's implicit, or rather complicit, it's been perpetuated by the lamestream media's complicitness for hyper-liberal commentary that has exacerbated the problem to a tremendous degree. So, as I said before, I don't necessarily have a problem with Domonique Foxworth's comments in and of themselves, because he was just expressing a viewpoint that many other people would probably agree with. But he's been emboldened by his employer. And the problem with that is the fact that his employer isn't emboldening other viewpoints. And other viewpoints are going to need to be emboldened in order to bring back the notion of fair and balanced, because that's what we desperately need, if they're going to embolden, any particular viewpoint at all. And they've made it very clear that they are in the business of getting into the socio-political game and emboldening, on-air talent to express their viewpoints however they see fit, so long as they don't violate SEC airwaves. Or FCC airwaves, But, that was pretty much what my analysis of, the situation with Domonique Foxworth was. I'll put a link into the description box so you can, it's a little 30-second snippet, from audio off of Twitter, so you can hear what he said and evaluate it for yourself. You might think that what he said was no harm, no foul, or you might, have a serious problem with it. As I said, I don't necessarily have a serious problem with what he said, but I have a problem with the fact that, he said it on such a prominent platform as an employee of ESPN. And it isn't necessarily that ESPN is allowing, is affording a platform for its on-air talent, that clings to that ideology. But if you're going to do it for one side, you need to do it for the other side. Again, I'm not anti-woke. I'm secular when it comes to social justice issues. Where necessary and where fair and reasonable, I'm all for it. But where there are matters of gray and nuance, I'm not necessarily against it. I am just someone that says, hey, there's nuance to this, and we need to dissect the nuance before we, definitively say that any opposing viewpoint to it is completely out of bounds and wrong. So that's pretty much where we at with it. But I'm going to go ahead and close it out on that note. Just try to be fair and balanced. If the lamestream media outlet if the lamestream media outlets aren't going to be fair and balanced when it comes to this socio-political commentary, then we as the people, we can sort of take up the mantra and say, to hell with it. We need to be, fair and balanced when it comes to how we take, the viewpoints of, those who are either on our side or those who are opposed to our side, so that we can sort of bring some law and order to this damn place, because things are just crazy. Things are crazy nowadays, man. It's out of control. And we need to sort of, rein it back in a little bit, man, before, people start killing each other out here, man. We done got to a point where, you got people out here who, they cutting people off that they've been friends with for years. I saw something, when the election was going down. I was seeing a lot of stuff on, thank God that's over, by the way. Thank God the election is over. My God. Damn. But I was seeing, things, all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. People were saying, if you voted for Donald Trump, if you consider me a friend, block me, erase my number out your phone. I'm cutting people off, who I've known for forever because they voted for Donald Trump. And it's like, guys, calm down. Like, so this person who you vouch for, you've known this person your entire life. You consider them to be a friend of yours. They're not an acquaintance. Not an acquaintance, a genuine friend. This is someone who is close to you, whom you have always believed to be a friend. And because you have knowledge that they voted for Donald Trump, you're now going to disassociate yourself from them. And you're going to do away with your friendship with this person because they voted with Donald Trump. Things are getting way out of hand. We are going way left with this. And we're getting out of control. Like, one's political affiliation has so many nuanced matters of gray in it that factor into one's decision to vote that, they may not necessarily be lock and step from a political standpoint as you, in terms of the process by which they go about voting, and you need to respect that. If this was a person who is a friend of yours, then just because they voted for Donald Trump, it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be a friend of yours, and it doesn't mean that they now somehow co-sign sexism or anti-woman or, racism or any of these other relative isms that you want to attach to a political figurehead. Like, it's a lot deeper than that. It's a lot more complex, and the proper respect to that needs to be given. I found it to be real sad that people were doing that, but that is an example of how far left we've gone in terms of this, socio-political climate, in America and probably other westernized countries, man. Things are out of control, and we need to rein it back in and think more in terms of what's reasonable. The mainstream media outlet isn't going to do it. ESPN has made it firmly clear that we will only afford a platform to people who are way on the side of social justice, and we are not going to afford the same opportunities for people who are more center-right, who aren't necessarily on the side of bigotry and intolerance, but are on the reasonable side of various aspects of traditionalism with respect to certain ideals and values that this country was built upon. And not all of those ideals and values are bad, honestly. And I'm saying this as a, black man in America in 2020. That's just the fact of the matter. We need to learn how to be more reasonable as people, and we're losing sight of that at a tremendous pace. We need to rein that back in. So again, not anti-woke. I'm just calling it how I see it. Domonique Foxworth's comments were what they were. It is what it is. But if you're going to afford that platform to him, you need to afford the same platform to somebody who might be on the opposite side of that. And right now, when it comes to regular cable television, mainstream media outlets, lamestream media outlets, because they are lame, this is the climate that we're in. And so long as this is the climate that we're in, we're going to continue to be, entrenched fully in this, heated environment in which we're just constantly bickering and fighting back and forth. And we are blurring the lines between what is objectionable and what is actually reasonable, but just simply a matter of disagreement. And we need to remember where that line is, because that line does still exist. But on that note, I'm gonna go ahead and close the video out. If you like the commentary in this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel, Conscious Approach. I really do appreciate it. Trying to grow the community as much as I possibly can. Trying to be consistent, because I do think that this platform entails commentary that people need to hear. We're more on the reasonable side. We aren't necessarily on one side or the other. I just kind of call things how I see it. You can definitely find me on Instagram at JVWins. You can find me on Facebook. Search Javis Ogden, JAVISOGDEN, first and last name on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter as well, Javis Ogden, but you can search JV Wins. You'll find me there as well. Again, follow back, please. Learn how to be more active on these social channels and whatnot. Definitely like and subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, please share it. I definitely appreciate all of the support of the community that we have at the moment. Looking to grow it more and more. Also, check out my boy, my usual partner on my videos, Dave De Niro G. He isn't here. This is my first video doing it solo, so getting a general feel for how I would like to do solo videos. It's a little weird, a little off-putting, but hopefully I'll get used to it. But definitely follow my man Dave De Niro G on Instagram at 305_and_beyond, as well as on Instagram at pvo.apparel. And check out the website, pvoapparel.store. He's got a lot of new designs coming out with his long sleeve shirts. We in the winter season now, so he's got a lot of hoodie designs coming out. I recently purchased one myself. I'll show you guys what it looks like. And he's expanding his brand, man. Lifestyle Promotions is a subsidiary, I believe, of PVO, and they're getting into the event management game. If you're in the Tallahassee area locally, they have got an event. I believe it is on January the 13th, which is a Wednesday, at Bullwinkle Saloon, Vibe Out Wednesdays. Please check it out. He's a hardworking guy, man, so you got to respect his work ethic. He's putting in a lot of work. And it isn't about making a whole lot of money, although, of course, financial freedom is the end game. It's about, building something so that you can eventually leave a legacy to those that you leave your namesake to. And, of course, trying to seek financial freedom, because that is freedom in life. And he's a hard worker, and he's building at a rapid pace. So I encourage you to check that out, as well as check out everything that Conscious Approach has going. We will continue to be posting regularly. I hope everybody is having a happy and safe holiday season, albeit amidst a pandemic. Good luck with all y'all who are, going to get inoculated. I hope it works out for you. I'll pass on it personally, not because I'm a conspiracy theorist when it comes to vaccinations, but because, I'm happy, I'm healthy, and, my body, I've always been able to kind of fight things off. I don't necessarily need to vaccinate myself, but that's just me. So good luck to everybody out there. I hope everybody's having a happy and safe, happy holidays. Merry Christmas to everybody. We'll keep the community thriving. We're going to keep things going. Try to be reasonable, man. Everything isn't always about what you think. Think about whether you're objecting to somebody's comments because they actually are objectionable, or whether they just don't, align lock and step with what you think. Just, I'll leave you with that tidbit. And to Domonique Foxworth, I'm a fan of you. Keep it going. I hope ESPN don't get rid of you. They probably won't, as long as you don't say crazy stuff. We'll leave, the headstones for people like Jamel Hill, who is just falling completely off the wagon. That's a video for another day. But on that note, this is JV Wins signing off. I will see you later. I'm out of there.